Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Qualifying Opportunities Virtually. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few things to help you get the most from today's event. When you logged in, you connected via computer audio by default. If you cannot hear or your connection is unclear, try logging out and back in first, or join over the phone. You can select the arrow next to the microphone icon in the toolbar to show options. If you click Switch to Phone setting, it will give you a list of dial-in numbers or call me. Everyone is muted today to ensure an excellent audio quality. You may submit questions at any time using the question pane accessed via the toolbar. We will do our best to incorporate the questions during the session. However, due to very large number of attendees, we apologize in advance if we're unable to get to your question. We'll provide resource links at the end of the session where you can get more information. And as a reminder, today is being recorded. You will get an email with links to the recording and the slides and some other information. And now I would like to introduce you to your host, Mark Grimshaw.
Hello everyone, and thank you, Donna, and thank you so much for joining us today on the first of our webinar series, which we've designed to deliver practical insight and assets that you can use immediately to move your business forward. And today's topic is qualifying opportunities virtually, which is a subject that's close to many of our hearts, I'm sure. So as we work through how to operate in this new world of social distancing and virtual interactions, time, and that is ours and our customers, seems more precious than ever before. And how we use that time needs to be as effective as we can make it. I had a great example of a client changing their perspective on time last week. She's a senior sales leader, and asked her for an update call. We know each other quite well. We're in the middle of a large project. And she suggested 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we're both based in North America. So I kind of had a moment. I wanted to be sensitive to her calendar, so I just double checked that she really meant that. And she said, oh yeah, as you know, I have 2 children, 5 and 7. I've completely changed my working schedule so they can read to them every night. She felt that they'd been unsettled enough by the situation, and also remarked that her team, her customers, partners, virtually everybody had just adapted immediately. And she actually joked, she said she wished she'd done it earlier in her career. Not sure that would have worked, but nevertheless, it's just a great example of how we're changing. So in this new normal, we probably have more time, or seem to have less time, and we also seem to have just different time. And more importantly, our customers are experiencing the same unforeseen and unwelcome disruptions to their daily lives and workflow. And as sales professionals, we need to both adapt for and with our customers in order to be successful. There are many ways we could do that, clearly, but today I'd like you to focus specifically and think of this through 2 lenses. The first one is, how can you deliberately decide to be more strategic and efficient in qualifying your opportunities so that your time is spent more efficiently, so as your customers, and both of you get the highest return for your combined investment. And secondly, we'd like you to remind you and remember to yourselves that prospects and customers judge us on the quality of the questions that we ask. So the structure and delivery of our questions has to be exactly right. And first and foremost, out of respect for our customer schedule, but also because we need to ensure that whatever we put forward to them, solutions or products, recommendations, are appropriate when the time is right. So we can move on to our next slide. We've split today's content into 3 sections. So first, we're going to share a perspective and a specific tool, which you can download at the end, or actually in an email later, to assist you in being continually strategic and efficient in how you qualify opportunities. Then we're going to cover in some detail a set of questions and how to frame them. And they're helpful in pretty much any opportunity with pretty much any product or service. And finally, we would love to give you the opportunity to let us know what's going on and what's working for you in these extraordinary times. And we'll share that set of data with the wider group as the webinar progresses. So that's our bit for today. If you look at the next slide, Kathy, we'd like to start with a poll, if we could. So let's kick off things by a bit of interaction, and we'd like you to think through the following question. So it's you'll think about it from your own perspective. Our organization consistently applies a formal approach to qualifying opportunities. It's a yes/no sort of question. And as you're answering this, I'd just like to put it in context. When we talk about formal here, we mean a process that's written down, something that is followed by the majority of people, understood by salespeople, sales leaders, and ideally by senior leaders. And I will just mention, we have no way of tracking what you individually answer, so feel free to answer. And Donna, if we could just see the results of that when they come through. It's an important question, and as you see the results in here, unsurprisingly, lots of sort ofs. None of us is perfect, me included. Interestingly, quite a few yeses in here, which is great to see, because we know from our research that having a formal process has a strong correlation with improved performance. And we would suggest that without the privilege of a face-to-face engagement, it becomes even more important that we do this in a virtual world. So onto the main content of where we are. The next slide, please. I'm joined today by two colleagues and friends who will help us through the content today. And the first is Kathy Nelson. Kathy has 30 years of sales and sales management experience. She's passionate about the Miller-Heiman tools and processes, and she used them both as a salesperson and as a sales leader. And then as a sales consultant, she's successfully assisted clients in driving sales performance, funnel efficacy, and change management, and is well respected in the industry for creating customer-focused selling and go-to-market strategies around the globe. Kathy will handle the second part of our material, but we're going to start with Rob West. And Rob was actually a client of ours when he led sales functions at organizations like Fidelity and Aramark. And he's been a consulting partner with Miller-Heiman for Korn Ferry for the last 17 years and worked with organizations, global and local, in most industries, but particular focus on and concentration in financial services, insurance and professional services. So over to you, Rob.
Great, thanks, Mark, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from, and thank you very much for giving us the privilege of your time for this morning or this afternoon. The header on this series is the new normal, which is really an interesting oxymoron, I think, as you think about it, the new normal. Recently, I was on a call with a senior leader from a large organization, and just a few minutes into the call, her 4-year-old was distracting her. Not sure exactly what he wanted. Perhaps he was hungry. Maybe he wanted his crayons. And she asked permission for her to join him, bring him onto her lap during our call. This was a discovery call. This happens to be a call where the gentleman you just heard from, Mark Grimshaw, was with us. And he did something quite clever in this new normal. Mark, do you have the fire truck that you brought forward in the middle of that call?
I do. For those that can see it on video, great. If you can't, it's a gaudy red and yellow fire truck. And Rob's actually right. We were talking with a senior leader who just sent 1,100 people home to work from home in their call centers. And the 4 of us are on a call. That's 3 of us and her son discussing fire trucks and all that goes with it. It was a great interaction, Rob.
It was indeed, and you know, it's interesting. I've probably participated in roughly 10 webcasts, webinars, thought leadership events like this over recent weeks, and everybody claims to have the secret sauce or the silver bullet for remote selling or virtual selling, as though we weren't, as though you haven't been doing this all along. I would argue what's different. Mark talked about how time is different. I don't know about you, but I'm finding some clients have more time than ever. Other clients have less time than ever. You know, Mark talked about 9 o'clock. I've never done as many weekend calls as I have over the last month. What's increasingly clear to us and to our clients is that time is more precious than ever. And the notion of being more strategic and efficient, I think are the words you used, Mark, but candidly more surgical in terms of your preparation and execution when you're qualifying opportunities and asking questions is critical, more critical than ever. You know, one of the things in many of the webcasts perhaps you've listened to, I know that I have, you know, picking up some great tips, some good ideas, but what I would tell you is my observation is that many of them are quite theoretical, quite academic, and as we watched those and participated in those, what struck us is that perhaps something that we could do for you would be to give you some very practical things that you could either use to validate the things you're already doing, or perhaps to go away and do some things differently. We're going to talk here in a minute about this notion of a strategic opportunity pursuit equation. And to tee that up, I want to jump into another poll. I think your answers to this poll will be somewhat telling and likely will feed this equation that we'll share with you. So here's the poll. Very simple question. When you win, what's the number one reason? So if you would take the next couple of moments to choose from these options, to just think about and select the number one reason. Number one, you win because you have the best people. Second, your product or service is just different. It's better. The whole marketplace knows it. Option three, the customer sees more return on investment with your solution set comparative to the others that they're considering. Number four, you outsell everyone else, and perhaps none of those fit the bill. If that's you, number five would be other. As the responses are coming in, let's jump forward, Kathy. I'd love to introduce you to the opportunity pursuit equation. And Donna, do we have enough to where we can get a bit of a preview in terms of what the results are looking like? So this is quite fascinating. We've got a pretty good blend here. I'm particularly drawn to the fact that only 8% of the time we're winning because we outsell the competition, but it looks like we've got some balance. And here's the reality that we've seen and that we've experienced is that if you are not commoditized yet, you soon will be. We work with organizations from all industries, and it seems as though everyone is ultimately commoditized in terms of their solution set, which is why so much time and energy is put into R&D and innovation. Commoditization can be a scary word, or it can be a wonderful word, depending on your perspective, right? For strategists and product development folks, it could be pretty scary. For salespeople, it can be pretty fantastic, actually. If you think about these reasons you win, which you just validated in the poll. Let's look at the first variable in the strategic opportunity pursuit equation, people. You win because I think roughly 10 or 15% of you said this, the customer, the client, the prospect observes that your people are just better, therefore you're hired. In other instances, your people look like everybody else's people. Your people are fantastic, but no better or worse than any of the alternatives. The second variable is your solutions. The third is the perceived ROI. The variable that we're here to talk about is the fourth variable in the equation, which is the opportunity pursuit strategy. The reality is that as you commoditize, the ability to outsell the competition is more important than ever. And this is, of course, not at the dismissal of investing in your people and your solutions and your ROI. It requires all of these things to have a consistently growing win rate. But your opportunity pursuit strategy will feed both the numerator and the denominator in the win rate fraction. When you think about your opportunity pursuit strategy, depending on how complex your sale is and how many people are involved from the customer organization, strategy means more in more complex selling settings. There are so many dimensions of outselling the competition. Perhaps it's the number of people and the level and the significance of the people to whom you're getting access. But sometimes it's these two things that you see here. Consistently qualifying opportunities through predictive criteria that have been established and have come into existence from your top performers that know what winning looks like before it happens or what losing looks like before it happens. And my colleague Kathy is going to speak to the most informative questions. You know, Mark talked about how people judge you based on the quality of the questions you ask. I'm sure you agree with that. I do. I've experienced it personally many times through all of the engagements I've both won and lost. So we're going to talk a little bit about how strategic opportunity qualification informs the numerator, how often you win, and the denominator, the opportunities, challenges, pursuits, sales that you actually engage in. Kathy, if you could punch us forward, what I'd love to talk about now is a little bit of science behind opportunity qualification. You know, the thinking on this was pioneered by McKesson a couple of decades ago. McKesson came out with the dynamic opportunity scorecard about 20 years ago, if I'm right. And it was fantastic. We interpreted the work they did. We built our own. Many of our peers in the industry have developed their own. When you think about a strategic opportunity quality scorecard, effectively what you're doing is you're bringing forward the criteria that fit into two categories, which really map to the quality of an opportunity. Category number one would be desirable, desirability. How desirable is an opportunity? By running an opportunity through a few quick filters, you can shine a bright light on how desirable it is. The second dimension of an opportunity's quality is what you might call winnability. And as you well know, some opportunities are highly desirable, but completely unwinnable. And we see our clients chase those opportunities all the time. Conversely, some opportunities are completely winnable, but not so high on the desirability scale. And the beautiful thing about thinking through this is that it doesn't have to be a long list. You can isolate the criteria that are the most predictive of an opportunity's desirability and winnability. The relevance of that in today's world, when Mark talks about efficient and strategic qualification, is cutting to the chase, getting to the quick, bringing forward in these remote and virtual interactions the type of dialogue that's going to be most beneficial for your customers and for you when time is so precious. If you have a tool like this one, there are many things that such a tool could do. We call these practical applications. I'm going to detail 3 of them in a minute and take you through some common criteria that we see, but I'm joined by my colleague, Kathy Nelson. Kathy, you've worked with a lot of organizations on different variations on opportunity qualification tools. What are some of the experiences you've had in terms of how they've been able to apply that practically?
Yeah, Rob, thanks for that. And I think, a theme today is around time. And Mark mentioned how precious it is right now. And one of the things that I've found with clients where we've invested and put together a scorecard like this is it saves them a lot of time. As you know, we do a lot of work around strategic analysis for complex deals. We take people through that strategic analysis that we call a blue sheet. And that can be, a time-consuming exercise. And what we found is that clients that put a scorecard in place have a really quick way to assess what are the key next actions. And so the thing that I guess I would share is that my clients have really found this to be a quick hit and a way for them to assess and decide what they're going to do in a short amount of time.
Yeah, excellent. I see the same thing, Kathy. Let's talk about some of these practical applications, time management. Contrary to popular belief, the best of the best don't singularly use such a opportunity qualification tool or approach as a go, no-go mechanism. While it can be helpful in that regard, I think probably the last thing that you want to hear from me and from us is how to pursue fewer opportunities. The punchline is that by being strategic and efficient through opportunity qualification, it can shine a light on where to spend the most of your time, where to allocate your time wisely against opportunities that meet that right intersection of desirability and winnability. The second practical application, you just heard Kathy talk a little bit about this. Many organizations have a fairly rigorous approach to opportunity strategy. She referenced the blue sheet. We, like our peers, have a methodology associated with strategically analyzing and pursuing an opportunity. I will tell you that I have a handful of clients that have a ratio of 5 or 6 to 1 in terms of the existence of these scorecard tools relative to that much more formal strategy. The benefit being that you can use a scorecard to inform actions to take to increase desirability and winnability if it's a really tight scorecard. The second part of the second practical application is around coaching. We've got clients that singularly use the scorecard for coaching when they look at opportunities and they want frontline leaders, for the leaders on this call, to be able to provide quick coaching. It's a wonderful mechanism to be able to provide quick coaching, especially in a virtual environment when you can share the scorecard and quickly move through the criteria. The third, and I might argue the most useful practical application of a strategic opportunity quality scorecard, is to feed the questions that you'll ask in order for you to prioritize them in sales calls. We have our scorecard. I find myself doing this all the time. I've done this 5 times in the last 2 weeks on existing and prospective client calls, where by bringing forward the most critical questions, I can accelerate the opportunity pursuit for me and frankly, the focus of the opportunity for the customer, so that we're talking about the right stuff faster. If you punch forward to the next slide, what I'd love to share with you are some categories. We call these the big 6 that transcend every scorecard we've seen, regardless of the industry that you're in, the products that you sell, the services that you provide. Every single scorecard that we have that's worth its salt contemplates these 6 categories, and then some, but these are the big 6. The first is around solution alignment and a deep understanding of what the customer is trying to fix, accomplish, or avoid. The second is around their decision-making process. The third is around timing. Good scorecards have criteria around other people and how our access to and the insights we're gleaning around other people that are involved will inform an opportunity's desirability and winnability. Another screening criteria is competition, and the last one's budget. And what we thought we would do for you is actually preview some criteria themselves that we see commonly in place across multiple scorecards, so that you can kind of compare them to either your scorecard, or if you don't have them, I think, Mark, your poll suggested that a third of the respondents actually had a formal written down approach to opportunity qualification, which suggests that 2/3 are in that sort of or we don't have it category. Our hope is that you can walk away from this session with some practical criteria. Here's examples that map to the big 6 categories. On solution alignment, key contacts have articulated that our solution is different and better than an alternative. So step back, yourself, and ask yourself with every opportunity if you're hearing that validation from your customers and your prospects. Timing. We know all of the elements of the critical path, including the decision-making, including the timing for impact. The truth is, most often the answer to that is no. And we would argue that's a good thing if you have the courage and determination and candidly skill, and this is where Kathy will come in, to be able to bring that information forward. Other people, we know who the economic buying influence, our term for the final decision maker, is. We have at least one strong coach. Budget, key buying influences have expressed the existence of a budget or a clear path to going to getting budget. You'll get all of this content, by the way, after the call, but here's the point. There are often many criteria that fall into these big 6 categories, and if this is the pool that you're fishing in, then you're in a good place, because these are categories we see the best of the best bringing forward on their opportunity qualification approaches. Mark, let me pause and ask, I know the Q&A box has been open. Are there any questions that have come up that we can address given the time that we have before I turn it over to Kathy?
Yeah, Rob, so thank you. And a number of questions, actually. I'll try and combine them into one that I think is just a great one. Back on your equation, you showed that there were a number of different variables, and you seem to suggest that here's the one that might be interesting. Just talk to us about, people were feeling there seem to be multiple things that might be affecting that. So is it really just one thing?
Yeah, clear indicator. We've got some pretty smart people on the call. Like with any equation, right? It's not one variable trumps all. It's more often than not a combination of these things. And the point we're trying to convey is that we want to fight the battle on all of these fronts, right? We're not suggesting that, our opportunity pursuit strategy in and of itself will win the day. There are a few of our practitioner clients that will say, even though our people are no good and our solutions are substandard and there's not a lot of ROI, we still won it, right? Like those are not the kind of wins that are, we're impressed by, that you're impressed by. It's always a combination of these things. And we are just doubling down or double clicking on this one variable for the purposes of this discussion. Mark, were there any others that we can maybe address before I introduce Kathy?
Yeah, actually, let me see if I can just pull one other out. It's a big 6 question, actually. If you go back to the slide of the big 6, you had a section in that, or a bubble in that, called other people. Just be a bit more specific. What are you really talking about when you talk about other people?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Kathy's going to talk a little bit about this, but the orientation here is that, one of the reality is that most of you, I would suspect, have what we would characterize as a complex sale. That's probably why you were drawn to joining a Miller Heiman Korn Ferry call, because that's where we do most of our work with clients. By complex, we mean multiple people involved on the customer-client's decision-making process. And so where that's true, it's almost always the case that there are additional people beyond those with whom we're interacting virtually in the moment that have a voice, that have a vote, that have a perspective that will have some bearing on the outcome. So what we mean by this is what are some things we need to explore about other people while we're interacting with one individual. So in the case of, Mark, if you were a customer, prospective customer, I might glean everything I could from you and what's most critical to you, but I might also know that Kathy is involved, but I don't have direct access to Kathy, or she's not with us now. So I might actually pose some questions to you, Mark, around Kathy's role and about what's most important to her, so that I make sure everybody's concerns are addressed as we kind of explore the opportunity and ultimately solve for it. Mark, thanks for those. I'm keen to get you into a little bit into the weeds with some of the questions that we promised that we put your way, and you'll see how these categories will feed some of the questions. Let me turn it over to my friend and colleague, Kathy Nelson. I've had the privilege to work with Kathy side by side for the last 15 years or so. She's worked with some of the best sales and business development organizations in the world. So Kathy, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Great, thanks for that, Rob, and thanks for everyone for joining. I think as we keep talking about time and efficiency, I want to get into some of the practicalities of the how. So Rob shared with us a little bit about the what we should be focused on in terms of opportunity qualification, and he gives me the tougher job to talk about, well, how do we go about doing it? So thanks for that, Rob. But I think that one of the things that we really need to focus on right now is how effective and efficient we are with respect to our customer interactions. We're kind of in week 4, week 5 of our self-quarantines. And I think we're starting to figure out what this remote working is all about, and our organizations are starting to figure it out a little bit too. We're starting to attend a lot of these online webinars similar to the one that you're on right now. Your organization's probably throwing a lot of online learning at you right now. And I know in the conversations that I'm having with clients, we're talking about how do we get better in this remote selling. And I think that my colleagues have already stated this, but I've got a real, disappointing statement for you. There's no silver bullet here. We don't have all the answers about what remote selling needs to look like, but we are going to try and impart with you a few ideas as to what we need to be doing differently. A colleague of mine recently said, right now everything is different. And it is. However, nothing's really changed. And by that, what I mean is foundational selling skills, foundational questioning skills are really the same as those that we've been trying to instill for many years, but now they're more critical than ever. So that's really what we want to focus on. As we think about our customer interactions right now, as they have been historically, there's typically 3 key things that happen when we interact. We try and get information, we try and give information, and we try and make sure that in every interaction we gain some level of commitment or action. In the time that we have with you today, we're not able to focus on all of these, so we're going to double click on the getting information piece. However, I will share with you anecdotally that when we've asked sales professionals in our careers, what are we best at? Invariably, we go to the middle box here. We're pretty good at giving information, and we spend time crafting our PowerPoints. We think about what we're going to say. We think about the font and the graphics that we're going to use to tell our story. When we ask sales professionals why they don't spend more time preparing to get information, the answer I typically get are things like, I don't like to write my questions down. It feels really scripted. It feels too formal. I'm a pretty good conversationalist, so I just kind of like to go with the flow. I think in this day and age of being on camera a lot, also being virtual with folks, we've got to be more poignant with how we prepare, not just what we're going to tell, but how we prepare what we're going to ask. And so that's really the focus of what we're going to do. And to Rob's point earlier, we want to share with you some practical examples, and we're going to give you some of the answers, or maybe better yet said, we're going to give you some of the questions as we go through our discussion today. As we think about getting information, there's a few key tenets that I want you to keep in mind. One is less is more. We are not talking about creating a laundry list of interrogation-like questions so that you can come at your clients just armed and ready to ask them things. What we want to think about are a few key questions that are going to get us into a good dialogue and ensure that we're in service to helping them make better decisions in these really uncertain times. We often talk about, well, what's the right number of questions? I don't know that we have that answer. I don't think there's a right number of questions for any given interaction that you're having. However, you do need to prioritize and think about what's the most important thing I want to get into and what order do I want to do that in. We've all been in meetings where we have a lot of questions than we have time for. So today we're going to help you think about how do you prioritize. Rob shared with you the big six. So that will be a starting point for how you can think about what questions do you need to ask most urgently and how do you prioritize those. And finally, let's admit it, not all questions are easy to get into. Some of those categories that Rob just suggested can be a little bit challenging or feel a little dicey. Sometimes we feel like we're being nosy or we don't have the right to ask some of those. So let's go to another poll to make sure that you guys are still not multitasking with us. And Donna, if we could pull up that poll, what we want to understand from you all is what are the categories that you're least comfortable exploring? And you can choose any that apply here. Is it around that solution alignment, what your client's trying to accomplish? Is it around their decision-making process? Or perhaps it's timing that gets a little bit challenging to ask about. We could think about other people or competition as a challenging question area. And then finally, budget. So we'll wait just a few seconds and see what kind of poll results we get, but recognize that as we go to put our questions together, it's really going to depend on who we're interacting with. It's also going to depend a bit on where they are in their decision process as to the types of questions that we think are most appropriate for any given discussion. So Donna, as you see appropriate, we'll go ahead and see what those poll results look like. Interesting. Okay, so our clear winner is we don't like to talk about competition, and right behind that is budget, and then kind of a tie, it looks like, between decision making and the people that are involved. So thanks you guys for sharing that. That was kind of what we expected to see with respect to the tough questions. We're going to talk about questions in all these categories, but we will spend some time in those that we think are a little bit more challenging than others. One of the things that we want to talk about are just giving you some sample questions. Rob mentioned that at the end of this, you'll get a recording, but also a download to the actual scorecard that he shared. We're also going to share with you these questions. So we've got some samples on each of these different categories. And keep in mind that we're also going to ask what questions you're using that you find effective at the end. So let's start with this idea of solution alignment and think about what's different today with respect to solution alignment. And the real difference that we're seeing right now is that our clients are really thinking about what they're trying to accomplish or fix or avoid in their new reality. So conversations that we may have had a month or 3 months ago may have changed dramatically from where they are now. But one of the things that we're finding is that our questions are still in service to what they want to get accomplished in the future. So I want you to really still be focused in these solution alignment questions around what success looks like in the future. Really crafting your questions in advance of a meeting can be super helpful, and practicing what they sound like and getting feedback from your peer group and your managers about how you're going to use these questions can be an opportunity that we can do right now in our new reality that we weren't able to do previously. But I do want you to be thinking about what's in service to what your customers are facing and what do they want to be changing in their future. So what they're trying to accomplish or their solution image may be dramatically different than what it was a few months ago when we were speaking to them. So there's a whole series of sample questions here, but I want to just encourage us to be thinking about what does the future look like and how can I ask about that? One of the things that we want you to also keep in mind with respect to your question asking is let's not make assumptions. Things are changing at a rapid pace, so we need to ensure that we're asking questions and gaining insights into what's going on. Let's move into the next category around decision-making process. What's changed with respect to that? Lots of things right now, right? Our organizations that we're dealing with are changing the way they're prioritizing the things that they're focused on. They're changing who's involved with those decisions, and certainly, as we'll get into in just a minute, their timing. Many of you suggested in the poll that the decision-making process is a tough thing to ask about. And I think that it's one of those things that we want to make sure that we're in service to helping our customers to make better business decisions. As salespeople, that's part of our job. And so asking a question similar to the top one that's highlighted here, help me understand how the final decision will be made. It really gets you informed so that you can make better decisions in your selling process, but it also might challenge your customer to step back and ask themselves, how is this decision going to be made this time? What's changing in our world that I need to be thinking about if this project is going to be successful? You'll find that sometimes in asking that question, you might get a response from your customer that says, you know what, I'm not sure. Here's a few things that we're thinking about that we need to be, doing differently. So this may get you into a really mutual discussion point that helps you to move the decision forward together. Another area that Rob suggested that we want to focus some time on is timing. We've been talking a bit today about the preciousness of time right now. This is one area that I can encourage you that we're all seeing a vast difference from our clients' perspective. Timing of projects is changing dramatically right now. I can share with you that I was in a recent conversation with one of my clients last week, and we were talking about the many changes that are happening to one of the projects that we're working on. Resources are going away. They're pivoting in terms of what they're thinking about, in terms of what they need to get done. And I changed the nature of the conversation by asking the question that you see highlighted here. I didn't ask about how we were going to get it done. I didn't ask about what was happening right now, but I said, when is it that we need to see the impact of this particular project? And the response came back, we still need to see the business impact before the end of this year. That allowed us to backtrack and have a different conversation about the fact that even though resources were changing, we really needed to focus on how we were going to get this project done so that the business impact would still be realized before the end of the year. So the way you ask your question can change the nature of the conversation and really put you in service as a business partner to your customers in a way that perhaps if we're not as thoughtful, or we just go in with our topics, that we're not going to get that same level of interaction and conversation going. We talked earlier about other people, and Rob answered a question about what we really mean by that. I'd share with you that in this day and age, and in this time frame that we're in right now, people are really concerned about what's going on within their organizations. They're concerned about their own jobs. They're concerned about their teammates' jobs. They're concerned about what's happening and how they're being perceived in terms of, I'm not physically in front of anybody, so does anybody know that I'm actually working right now? We all know that probably today we're working more hours than we have been historically because there's just so much coming at us. So I think with respect to people, we have to be really mindful of that empathy that we have to come into play with. And this is often a challenging subject to get into. One of the reasons I think it can be challenging is if I'm interacting with someone, the last thing they want to hear from me is, who else in your organization is involved? Because it kind of diminishes who they are. So the way that I typically ask the people question has to do with making sure they know how much I feel for them. And so in addition to yourself, who else in the organization is going to be most impacted by the success or the failure of this initiative, which gives the person that I'm interacting with some of the credence that they deserve, but they may open up to me and help me understand who else. Another tough area, and this was one of our top poll getters in terms of tough questions, had to do with competition. And I can tell you that this is often a sticky situation. When we speak with sales professionals, they'll say, gosh, the last thing I want to do is remind people that there's competitors out there, right? Or I think I know my competitor pretty well, really don't want to get my customer talking about who else they're looking at. One of the things that we think about with respect to the questions around competition isn't just to ask about your named competitors, but to really understand what are some of the alternatives that you're considering? And then importantly, how do you feel about those options? These kinds of questions can get us into a much broader conversation than just who else am I up against? These questions can really help us to understand how they're looking to solve and what the potential strengths of some of the alternatives are, so I can set my strategy appropriately. I had the bravery to ask this kind of a question recently in a pursuit, and it was so fascinating because I asked the question almost as you see it here, help me understand what are some of the alternatives that you're looking at? And there was dead silence on the phone. And so this is a piece that we don't have a lot of time to go into, but having the courage to just let there be silence right now can be really important. As that silence ensued, the client came back to me and said, I wasn't sure if we should share this with you, but we're really exploring how we might do this internally, given the current budget constraints and situation. But we're concerned about whether we've got the right resources in-house. That broadened our conversation to talk about how they felt about that alternative and what I might be able to do to help them to be able to make this situation work for them. So I encourage us to think about what some of these tough questions might look like. In our final category, budget is often something that we wait until the very end of a sales process to talk about. It seems like that taboo subject. I don't want to get it there until I get into a negotiation. Rob, I think you had a really great example of how you're using some budgetary questions in our current crisis.
Yeah, I do, Kathy. And, you said something really important a few minutes ago that I hope everybody takes on board. In the poll, it showed, as we expected, that the tough questions were competition, budget, with, I think, decision process, and other people a close third and fourth. The piece that I love that you shared was that it's about mindset on asking some of these tough questions. I think my own experience has been that people are reluctant to get into some of these tougher categories because, as you said, it makes them feel like they're nosy or salesy, or it's information they don't deserve to have. But the reality is that if your mindset is that the very reason why you're going into some of these sensitive areas is to, as you said, Kathy, put the customer, the prospect, in the best position possible to make the smartest decision that they can make. If that's your mentality, as you ask questions, you'll be much more confident when you come forward with these questions, like the examples you gave around timing and even competition. I love that story. I've had similar instances to that one you just described, Kathy. On budget, budget can be a tough question, but if your mindset is that the reason you want to explore the budget is so that you can position the customer, the client, to do their best work, then it won't bother you. And now it comes to the skillfulness that you use to ask the question. So with that, that customer-centric mindset, positioning a budget question like this one you see on top, what do you need from me to help you create the business case? Do you need any help to secure funding? Does funding already exist? What is your investment tolerance for this project, right? The reason I want to understand these things is so that I make sure that I don't way overscope or underscope the solution and waste, my customer's time. And in the example from last week, I had a customer who described in great detail a proposal that she wanted us to provide, which was fantastic. We had traveled these other windows. We'd explored solution alignment and the people involved and the competitive alternatives and the timing. We had done all of that. And there was a lot of work for us to do to come back with the proposal. But in my head, one of the big 6 categories had remained unvisited, which was budget. And so I asked the question as you see it here, Kathy, and the comment came back, no, actually, we've got the budget. The issue is that we understand that our budget's being cut by about 2/3. And so this is what it's going to, leave us to invest in for this project, which was wonderfully helpful for us, right? Because we can go away and, scope the project appropriately.
Thanks for that great example, Rob. So in conclusion, what we really want us to think, everybody to think about with respect to the questions is less is more. We need a few good dialogue starting questions to get us into these conversations. we've got to prioritize what we need to find out in this particular interaction, being mindful of the time that we have and the situation that people are in today. And we want to encourage you not to shy away from the tough questions. I think we just need to take in mind, be in service to the customer right now, as Rob just suggested. Helping our customers to make better business decisions is what we're all about. I will share with you the really, practical and maybe self-evident thoughts about writing your questions down and using this opportunity in our remote selling situations to create some habits that we can take forward with us out of the crisis. Practice those questions with your peers. Practice them with your manager. Put your own Zoom camera on and practice them with yourself. Ask yourself whether or not these are good dialogue starting questions. We've got a real opportunity right now, I think, to create some great habits. And I encourage us all to really double down on some of these foundational selling skills. Mark, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up, but before I do so, are there any questions in our Q&A box that we need to respond to?
Actually, Kathy, I'm so pleased you asked, because there have been a number, but I'm going to try and kind of consolidate into a couple. By the way, we'll answer all of the questions that are in the Q&A specifically in some of the follow-up material. So if you asked a question, thank you, and we'll come back to you. But let me pick a couple that have come up a few times. The first one, the second one's about the big six categories. Again, a lot of interest there. But the first one is an interesting one, which is in the virtual world in which we find ourselves now. It feels like we should be prepared to share direction or information, impart information. But so why do you think questioning is so important in this particular environment?
Yeah, that's interesting, Mark. And again, it kind of goes back to what we're historically good at, right? Or like to do as salespeople. We feel like that's our job. And I just think right now, more than ever, we need to be understanding more than we need to be understood. So this is the time frame in which we need to really ask, how are people doing? We keep hearing this, right? At the beginning of every conversation, we've asked that for years. Right now, we really mean it. So I think what we need to do is be in service to helping our customers to navigate their uncertainties. And we can do that more effectively through questions than we can through statements.
That's great. Thank you, Kathy. And just one more before we move on to to how people get hold of the information that's here, which is specifically when you look at the big six. Again, both of you have talked through details of them, and all of the questions that Kathy talked through, they'll be available in the material afterwards as well. But is there an order? Is there an ideal order for that big six category? Those big six categories?
Yeah, great question. And I think that ideally, if you look at the big six, it kind of goes in order, right? Understand first the solution alignment, understand what somebody's trying to accomplish, fix, or avoid. Then understand what their decision process is, what their timing is, and what else they're looking at. So I think that they actually kind of fall in order, but I challenge us all to say, where is your customer in their decision process? And that's going to really, I think, indicate where we need to prioritize and focus our questioning. But the big six kind of go in a nice flow, but it's really going to depend on where your customer is in their process.
That's great. Thank you, Kathy. That's fantastic. I said there were a load more, but in the essence of time, we'll let you move on.
Okay, so we shared with you the fact that you'll be able to get a recording and a download at the end of this webinar series, but we also said to you at the beginning there'd be a challenge associated with understanding what are some of the great questions that you ask. So in exchange for us sending you some of the ones that we've shared today, we're going to put a challenge out there. So if you want to use your phone right now with the QR code, you can take that, and this will give you a portal by which you can submit some questions that are working well for you. Now, why would you submit that to us? Well, it's in a service to give to get. If you give us some questions, we're going to send them back to you. I'm going to come back around to our theme of time. One of the things that I've worked with clients for a long time around is creating question banks. Question banks being a place that they can go to take a look at some good, well-crafted questions. Think about how they're going to tweak them for their upcoming interactions. So if you don't mind supplying us with some good questions that you feel are in service to your business, we'll scrub them and we'll send them back out to everybody so that all of the organizations can get an advantage of creating their own personal question bank that they can draw from in the years to come. With that, Mark, I'm going to turn it back over to you to finally wrap us up.
So thank you, Kathy, and to everybody else as well. We'll finish in the next minute or so and give you the privilege of the other 10 minutes of your hour. But I'd just like to thank both our speakers, Kathy and Rob, and most importantly, all of you for spending your time with us today. Please consider spending just a few more minutes on that challenge. It'll be fascinating to see just how the focus of questions is changing in the new world that we're in. And remember that we're at the big. Remember also that we'll send you a link to that foundational scorecard, so you can have that data as well, in line with our trying to give you practical tools and assets that you can use. Finally, just a quick reminder, this is the start of a series of webinars. We hope what you've seen here today encourages you to come and see the others, and remember, don't forget that on Thursday of this week there's a happy hour, which is a much more informal opportunity to talk with Rob and Kathy and the rest of the panel about the subjects of today. So thank you all for joining us. Please look after yourselves and also those around you. Many thanks. Cheerio.